So I will therefore move that we agree that item 11, the approval of block offer 2015 council submission, be accorded precedence at this time, seconded by Councillor Cooper. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. So therefore we move to item 11. And Dr. Blakely and Dominic are going to be presenting on this item.
Mr Chairman, councillors, I'd like Dominic McCarthy to be able to make a brief presentation to you about the paper and the submission, and then we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dominic.
Just waiting while the presentation loads.
Yeah, it's just slow right now. That's
Thank you.
Right. The agenda report provides some background to the government's administration of, under the Crown Minerals Act, of minerals that includes petroleum, and mentions how the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment and its agency, New Zealand Petroleum and Minerals, carries out an annual block offer process where it tenders prospective exploration areas. The council last year responded, this is 2014 we're looking at on the screen here, responded to block offer 2014, and on the screen you can see maps of what was proposed. I'll just see if I can get the pointer. Interestingly, the area of large basin called Northland Rianga Caledonia, you can see in 2014, last year, overlaps with the 12 nautical mile boundary. That's the coastal marine area that includes the area that this council and others administer under the Resource Management Act.
Chair, can you also indicate
yes,
on that one as well?
My apologies.
Thank you.
Moving down this area. So the northern area overlaps with the regional boundary. Also, just quickly, I'll jump to this one. I'll start on this one. It's also fairly evident, and I'll show later in a slide, that it overlaps much more strongly the further south you go as you approach Taranaki, which is where the Maui's Dolphin Marine Mammal Sanctuary, North Island West Coast Marine Mammal Sanctuary, is located. So that's 2014. The governing body last year approved a council submission which formed the basis of this year's submission because, let's see if we can get this to go. Can we make this move forward? One more slide. Does anyone want to do it? Arrow down.
Where's the computer?
That's it.
That's it then.
Right. We seem to have frozen. All right, well, the next slide, when it does come up, what it will show is the entire block offer. In your agenda report, it is, in fact, attachment A. There it is. Thank you. This shows, it's a little bit hard to see, but what it does show is the large areas, this Northland Rianga, New Caledonia Basin, which was also last year included up here. Similarly, it shows a large Taranaki Basin, which was included last year. This is the one that overlaps with the Marine Mammal Sanctuary. This view, which is attachment B to the agenda report, shows a closer view, which is a little bit easier to see and to understand in terms of its relationship to the coast, and also in particular to the regional boundary, coastal marine area of Auckland. Once again, the interesting thing to note here, compared to the image you just saw previously of 2014, in this northern area, Caledonia-Rianga Basin, it no longer overlaps with the 12 nautical mile boundary. It's been pulled further offshore. However, this Taranaki Basin area, with the block offers, still crosses over the regional boundary and extends into the marine mammal sanctuary. This slight close-up shows the 125 square kilometre, roughly, overlap with Auckland's part of the coastal marine area. This is just a reminder of the location of the North Island West Coast Marine Mammal Sanctuary, established to protect Maui's dolphins, which were strongly recognised in the 2014 submission from the Council, and similarly are strongly recognised in the proposed or draft submission here. Note the large area down here. And if we just briefly nip back for comparison, it allows you to see that there is overlap with that area in the proposed block offer. So that brings us in sort of fairly in summary to the proposed main points within the submission. To start off with, it's looking for consistency. This is paraphrasing. If you want to see the real words, they are more detailed within the document itself. So we're seeking consistency of the approach that the government takes, this is the recommendation, over avoiding marine mammal sanctuaries, because the Hector's Dolphin Sanctuary off Banks Peninsula was avoided, whereas the Maui's Dolphin Sanctuary on the North Island West Coast was not. So the first point is seeking consistency of approach by not overlapping with either of those marine mammal sanctuaries. The second point is effectively identical to the one in last year's submission, but now tailored to the fact that it is only the Taranaki Basin block offer area which is still overlapping the 12 nautical mile zone and specifically extending into the Maui's Dolphin Sanctuary. So it seeks to amend the area to be at least 12 nautical miles offshore, for the purposes in particular of avoiding the impact upon the Maui's dolphin. The third point, which is identical to last year's proposed submission, is asking that DOC's guidelines for acoustic disturbance be followed. And you'll notice it also includes saying that that should be within a distance, not just the marine mammal sanctuary itself, but in recognition of the fact that underwater noise travels quite a long way, the sensitivity of these animals, the request is for 20 nautical miles from the sanctuary. There is a fourth general rule, submission point, which recognises the sensitivity of the environment of the West Coast in particular, and seeks that there are actions taken that would result in what it says there, minimising the risks from oil spills in particular, but other discharges, etc., associated with the exploration and potential drilling. And then the last point is also identical to last year's submission, and it requests essentially integration between different agencies that have responsibilities, and the mechanism is to keep iwi and local authorities informed, information sharing effectively. Now this is a rather dense slide, and I'm not expecting that you're going to be able to read the major additional points. The major points really are, we had the opportunity this time round, unlike last year, to seek feedback from local boards. Local boards here have responded. In particular, I think people might be interested in the Waitakere Ranges submission, which is essentially identical to last year's, and they make various points. If you're able to read them, there's a summary of them. All of those local boards agree and support the council submission. 3 of the local boards would go a little further and oppose oil exploration in its entirety off the west coast. Effectively, if you like, Waitakere Ranges leading the charge, Puketipapa and Waiheke Islands supporting the Waitakere Ranges position and then expanding upon it. Both Papakura and Franklin didn't specifically address that point. They didn't say one way or the other. available for questions.
Mr. Chairman, that's the end of our presentation. We're pleased to answer any questions.
So just for clarity, the points that you've raised or changed are the same as last year, except for point 1. Is that right, in relation to the overlap?
Oh, it's gone.
Yes, that's correct, and that's because with the benefit of what's happened in last year's process, we're drawing the attention of the government to the fact that they did respond by excluding the prospecting area from the marine mammal sanctuary area in Banks Peninsula, and so we pointing that out that they, in our advice, they could do the same thing for Maui dolphin.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker?
Just got a few questions. Going to the question that I asked Steve Abel, has this council done any analysis on what the costs would be, economic, environmental, social costs, if there were an oil spill? And let's say that the modelling from Greenpeace is accurate, and that is what we're looking at. What happens? What are the costs? What happens? How do we respond? What's the impact? Have we done any work on that?
Through the Chair. Short answer is no. We have not done any modelling and assessment of economic impacts of that scale.
Okay, and further to that, if we have an oil spill, as much and all as the block has got a boundary, is it not the case that the area that's outside that block, especially up the coastline, the Waitakere fishery, all of that area would be impacted? I mean, we can, I'd suggest, make that assumption, can we not?
Again, through the Chair, the concerns that were raised about modelling did not say that those risks would not occur at all. They just simply were debates about the frequency and likelihood of occurrence. So the short answer would be yes.
Okay, and just in terms of some other policies and strategies that we've got, we've had an Auckland plan that was very widely consulted on, and part of that plan, which has been adopted, goes to biodiversity strategy. Where does our biodiversity strategy stand on species loss in Auckland, and in particular reference, let's say, to the Maui dolphin? What's our policy?
I'll answer that. Yes, the Auckland plan makes a particular point about the importance of protecting our biodiversity and inhibiting any further biodiversity loss, and it also includes specific reference to the critically endangered Maui dolphin, and that measures should be taken to avoid any further loss of that species. So, and this submission is consistent with the Auckland plan in making a particular point about the importance of protecting Maui's dolphin.
So just to clarify then, it's effectively zero tolerance, is it not? No loss of species?
Yes.
And how many Maui dolphin are we down to, roughly, in breeding pairs? And I'm asking this because it's not in the report that we've got.
It's a little over 50.
And breeding pairs?
Sorry.
Breeding pairs? Males and females?
I'm not sure, sorry.
Maybe it's around 14 or so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to, I've only got one question, but before I ask that, I just want to thank Dominic and the team for the preparation, the very difficult process of preparing this submission. For people who are passionately committed to their role as environmental stewards, I can't begin to imagine how difficult it is to prepare a submission with your hands effectively tied. So Dominic, and Roger, just thank you for the work that you've done, and in no way should we question our staff who have done everything they can in their limited power to present this submission. My only question, and I will be speaking to the submission, to the recommendations, my only question is, can you just remind us, it's on page 63, but it's probably worth noting, what changes were made to our submission that we sent at the end of the year to government?
Through the Chair, just clarifying, do you mean the response of the government? In effect, there were no changes made at all. The government's response was that regulatory controls and legislation adequately manage the concerns that we raised.
Thank you. I'll speak to the recommendations.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I heard a lot about the Maui dolphin and the council's concern to protect it. Do you feel that it's realistic in advancing those concerns to ask for deep sea drilling to be moved 12 nautical miles from the Maui dolphin sanctuary area? Do you think that's good enough to protect them?
Do you want to comment on that?
Through the chair, the request was actually at least 12 nautical
At
miles.
least,
Yes,
okay.
it was at least,
Could
and
be
the
13.
submission itself also describes how, in preference, the 100-metre contour would have been something that we would have preferred, but we were anticipating, that's as a council, that might not be acceptable to the government, and we were putting forward an option that we thought might be at least a practical compromise. However, the submission, last year's submission and this year's, makes it clear that the 100-metre contour was the preferred approach.
Okay, it was not acceptable to government to ask for more. Okay, the second point, you made an interesting comment in regard to the responses of the local boards that many supported the council's conditional support, but two opposed it. And so you said they went a little further. Do you consider conditional support and the position of total opposition is just going a little further?
I may have been a little unclear with my slide. It was a bit of a complicated slide. All local board responses supported and endorsed the council's position. They sought, in several cases, to go further.
Little further, not further. Okay.
Well, further. In fact,
Further, that's right.
Waitakere Rangers
Quite a
local
bit
board,
further, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Quite a bit.
Yep, well, that's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Casey.
I'd like to ask a question and just give notice of an amendment, Mr Chairman, I'd quite like to put up.
Yes, thank you.
My question relates to the hard-hitting submission from the Christchurch City Council, which I have a copy of, and just wondered if you have any response to that. You didn't mention it today. Have you a response to it?
Through the chair, I'll just draw attention to the reason why this submission is in fact in front of you all today, which is to provide you with a framework that you can then add to and amend at your will. The idea is that we present you with a draft submission based upon the information that we can pull together within the timeframe that was available to us that required circulation to local boards in December. You have the opportunity to modify it and amend it as you see fit, and that becomes the council's submission. So the matters that are raised, the position that is taken by Christchurch City Council is very similar to the one that Waitakere Rangers local board has taken in the past and has taken again, and this council could take if it chooses to.
Well, can I just add to what Mr McCarthy said? So the Christchurch City Council position was to oppose any offshore drilling, full stop. And of course that then comes to a question around what value you place on potential economic benefits associated with offshore drilling versus the environmental risks. And so the recommended submission, if I can just draw your attention to paragraphs 21 to 23 on page 77 of the order paper, sets out that dilemma and says that exploration could bring significant economic benefits to Auckland as it has done for Taranaki. On the other hand, it says that there are significant risks from offshore oil and gas exploration, and it's important that those risks be minimised or eliminated. So that's the public policy dilemma, if you like, and so that's really a matter for this council to determine where it wants to go on that question.
Thanks for that clarification, Roger, and it is that particular paragraph that I seek to amend.
Thank you. Councillor Crum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask a question, please, on why you, or the background for why you felt you could put the terminology strongly support council submission for both the Waitakere Local Rangers Board and the Poki Te Papa Local Board? And then in addition to that, will you be including their documents as attachments to the submission?
Through the Chair, because the submission strongly supported the council's draft submission, so the responses from the local boards, that's the reason for that. And with the approval of this committee, yes, the hope or expectation was that local board responses would be appended to the council submission.
Well, again, if I can just add to that, I think the key point here is that the environmental responses, the proposed strong submission to government to move the exploration area outside the mammal protection area and other environmental responses that were in our top 5 recommendations there, they were supported by the local board. So they supported the environmental controls. The difference is that they were also going further, to take Councillor Lee's point, and recommending there be no offshore exploration, full stop.
Thank you. Councillor, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I just noticed in the Māori impact statement that iwi have their own mechanism through the Crown's Mineral Act to be consulted by the Crown, but also that we've done some consultation here as a council. The feedback, there was only 2 feedback from iwi, Kawerau Tribal Authority, who have given tentative support to the submission, but I understood was going to table their position today. I'd like an update on that. And secondly, Ngāti Tamoho, in the 2013 block offers, gave a submission something along the lines that they wanted consents to be reduced to 5 years. But I guess my other concern is that there are plenty more iwis up along the coastline, right through to the northern tribes. What have we done to talk to them? What impact does this submission have? This submission doesn't seem to have much focus on commercial fishing, recreational fishing, customary food gathering, and I'd just like your comment on that, because I'm not clear about a position today necessarily around the information I've got at this point.
Through the Chair. So the first point, what further response, an update in other words, on what's in the Māori impact statement. Te Kawerau Iwi Tribal Authority interim response is the only response that we have received at all. So Ngāti Tamoho have not responded. If they were part of the 26 iwi that we contacting, they would have been. There has been no response. Second question, what about the more northern tribes? We contacted the 26 iwi and hapu groups that have within the area that the council overlaps with their rohe. That was the process that we went through, and weren't attempting to duplicate the government's national responsibilities. As far as not much information there about economic or commercial activities and customary fishing, etc. Within the document that's proposed the submission, there is commentary upon the sensitivity and value of the areas that could be impacted, and that's expanded upon within the local board responses further. They identify further values. Basically, that's the position.
Well, I'll just note that the submission was sent out to iwis on the 23rd of December, before Christmas. It was recirculated 5th of January. I know, being on an iwi trust board, a couple of them myself, many of them don't meet during the month of January, so I'm not sure what sort of feedback you're expecting around those timeframes.
Yes, absolutely correct, and that's precisely the same difficulty that this council struggled with in terms of its requirement to also engage with the local boards that make up part of the council, which is why the submission includes commentary back to the Minister explaining the difficulty that the timing of this particular submission period, which overlapped with Christmas and New Year, caused for that process, and requests again that and the 2014 submission identified the concerns that were related to it overlapping with local body elections. This year it's overlapped with Christmas and New Year, and we in the submission propose that it urge the Minister to align the submission period with a time when local government process can in fact respond, and that would also apply to iwi.
Thank you. Councillor Brewer.
Oh, thank you. Just on the submission, the submission point, amend the Taranaki area to at least 12 nautical miles offshore to avoid Maui dolphin sanctuary habitat adverse effects. Do we know, Roger, what Taranaki's official view is on this, and whether they are, through their Taranaki Regional Council, their New Plymouth District Council, local iwi, and I'm talking Te Atiawa or Ngāti Ruanui, whether they've made a submission, what their view is on either block offer 14 or block offer 15?
Through the chair, we haven't been able to get copies of the submissions from the other councils directly affected, such as the Taranaki Regional Council, because they're in the same process as we are and have finalising their submission, which is due in by the 9th of February.
I can just expand on that a little. We do not. It's absolutely correct. What we do know is what happened last year for 2014. Taranaki Regional Council, there was no mention of a submission from them. There is mention of submissions from the district councils, and they were concerned about some of the potential impacts upon areas of sensitivity or significance that they were, this is land-based component, not the offshore component.
Okay.
And so that's our understanding.
So from your understanding, there was no submission from the Taranaki Regional Council or local iwi in 2014?
No, local iwi there definitely was, and district councils there was,
There were.
but there was no record of Taranaki Regional Council making a submission.
Okay, thank you. My second question, Roger, is just, I suppose, as elected representatives, I just want to be able to reconcile, the council's general comments here that you've alluded to on page 77, that exploration and production could bring, quote, significant economic benefits to Auckland as it has done in Taranaki, to what we've heard from our presenter, who've said that all the money goes offshore and the economic gains are nominal. There seems to be a big gap there between what council's saying and what we're saying. And also, the quote from the previous speaker was that that it was a high risk of activity. And again, the council in its general comments talks about the likelihood being low. And so we're being presented with a divergence of view on the risk and on the economic benefits, and I just wonder if you're able to help us as to where we should head.
Well, through the chair, if you look back over the years since oil prospecting and then drilling began in Taranaki, there's no doubt that the Taranaki economy has grown and that the oil exploration and the supplementary support activities on shore have contributed to that. In terms of the risk issue, what we are saying and what the Minister also is saying and has said previously is that it's believed that the risk is low, and what the Council submission, as we are recommending it to you, is doing is impressing further measures to ensure that the risk is as low as possible. One of the points that is sometimes raised here is the comparison with the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, but there is no doubt there are differences between the geology in the Taranaki Basin and the geology of Mexico. The substrata are different, the pressure is not as great, and the oil in the Taranaki Basin. So the risk is assessed by scientists to be lower here than Gulf of Mexico. That's not to say there isn't a risk of a lower level disaster, and Rena is an example of some of the problems that can occur. So we would not want to understate the risk, and in fact quite the opposite. We're recommending in this submission, if you agree to it, a strong statement to the Minister about measures that need to be taken to further enhance the control and elimination of the risks.
But can I confirm that the council believes, as the submission and report reflects, that the exploration and production could bring significant economic benefits to Auckland. And so what we're effectively saying is it could mean jobs, it could mean a lot of onshore activity, and it could mean significant economic gain. That's what we're saying as a council.
Well, that's our professional advice to you is the Taranaki experience would indicate that there are economic benefits as shown here. We have not done a detailed economic study in support of that.
Thank you.
Well, Councillor Wayne Walker, you
Just
have
very
a
quick question. And I'm looking at the Christchurch process, where they have actually examined a number of issues as it goes to Christchurch, in terms of spill response, in terms of impact on the economy. They reference the cost of the Deepwater Horizon in the billions. Would it be fair to say that the information that was presented to Christchurch City Council would apply very much to our circumstance, and in point of fact our circumstance, because of issues like the Kaipara fishery and the like, could be even worse?
Well, there's no doubt there is risk involved in offshore exploration and drilling, and no one is questioning that. It's a question of how might you minimise or eliminate that risk, and what is the both the probability and the impact of it. So it's probably a very low probability of occurrence, it's potentially a high impact, and so that's the sort of risk analysis that has to be done.
I'm referring in particular to the comments they make about the, frankly, very poor response we have, oil spill response. I'm just trying to get some information to inform us, Mr. Chair.
You said it was going to be a very quick question.
It was quick.
And I think we have to move forward, and that question is, you're just kind of reverberating what's in the report.
Well, it's not in our report, but it is in the Christchurch
it's in their report. You could go, I think when you said it was a quick question, I think you misled to some extent. Okay, Councillor Cashmore, you got the
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Blakely, looking at Canterbury and comparing it to offshore, our area, what is the differential in risk, compared to the earthquake basis in Canterbury as compared to Auckland? Is that similar to the onshore earthquake differential of risk?
I don't know the answer to that.
Can't tell you offhand if there's any difference between offshore and onshore seismic risk. Is that the question you're asking?
Yes, because on land here we're 10,000 times less likely to have an earthquake occurrence than in Canterbury. Now I was wondering if offshore is a similar sort of number.
Yes, there is highest seismicity in the country is around Wellington. Second order is around the Christchurch Canterbury area. Third order around the Auckland region. So we do tend to be somewhat lower than Christchurch.
Thank you.
Councillor Clow.
Yes, Dr. Blakely, I just want to further expand on point 4. We've got 5 responses that in recognition of the sensitivity of potentially impacted area, the government take action, including in assessing tenders. Arguably, our standards are not international best standards regards what the drilling companies have to follow and safety procedures, etc., response procedures. What are we trying to say there, including in assessing tenders, or what are we asking them to be good boys and just worry about the dolphins, or are we talking about trying to improve the standards that they have to follow? So I thought that's much more important.
So what we're talking about is certainly the standards that are required to be followed, but also what we're saying specifically in regard to assessing tenders, that what we'd recommend that one of the key criteria for evaluation of tenders would be the performance and record of the tenderers in terms of their ability to manage this operation without any oil spills. So that's key criterion.
Do you think we're strong enough in our advocacy of that in the document?
Well, we think it's very clear, but if you would like to make it stronger, then so officers would certainly support that.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
I think I'll leave it.
Thank you. Councillor Anai.
Just a quick question. Have we assessed what the damage could be to the fishing industry if anything happened on that coast?
Through the Chair. Not specifically. We've identified a series of sensitivities. No, we haven't carried out that type of detailed analysis.
I think we should look at that because it's one of our export businesses.
Thank you. Councillor Brewer, you got another question or a short question?
Just following on from Councillor Clow, Dr. Blakey, the government has been at pains in the last few years to point out the changes that it's made to its regulatory regime, that it's now calling its regulatory practices and regime world-class. It's changed a number of health and safety regulations, its high hazards unit, and other such safety and health practices that it's taken through the Parliament. Are you satisfied? The comment's been made that, that perhaps our regime practices as a country may not be up to speed. Are you satisfied with those governmental changes, that we have a regulatory environment that can, mitigate the risk as much as possible?
Well, certainly the government has, as you say, made significant moves to ensure there is a robust regulatory regime, and indeed Minister Simon Bridges, Minister of Energy and Resources, made the point in this morning's Herald that he believed that the regime is such that the risk is very low. So that's not to say that it can't be improved, and specifically again our 5 recommendations are really areas that we think the regulatory system could be tightened up, and that government could be responsive to this council's submission for taking the exploration area outside the Maui Dolphin Sanctuary area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. With no other questions, I'll thank Dr. Blakely, Mr. McCarthy, and I will now move the motion that the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee approved the attached submission in response to the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment's Block Offer 2015 consultation. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Quacks. Sorry. And I'll now ask Councillor Casey, you have an amendment you want to put there.
I'll second the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Well, hang on, we do it.
It's already been done. John's a bit quicker
I'm
this
going to read the amendment. I
He's
don't
beaten
think-
you. That's okay.
Councillor Casey, do you want to move the amendment?
I'll be brief. We're guardians of a precious environment, and I voted against the last submission. Yep. We are guardians of a precious environment. And I did vote against the last submission simply because it wasn't nearly strong enough. We do need to oppose offshore drilling off the coast of Auckland, and we didn't do that last time, and that was my reason for opposing. As we've heard from Dr. Blakely, we have the opportunity to strengthen this submission. And I think there has been a sea change in terms of public demanding that we take better care of our natural resources. So what I did last night was just, my colleague Councillor Walker mentioned the Auckland Plan. I got a hold of the Auckland Plan. Now remember, this is a plan that we wrote together. There was thousands of submissions, and I think it's one of the best things we've ever produced. And the chapter on the environment is very, very clear. After seeing Steve's map on that oil spill, there are 2 maps in here that you should refer to when you get home. One is the coastline is coloured yellow for areas of coastal ecological significance. Then there's a map with the 55 Maui's dolphins swimming up and down. We are the dolphin defenders. We're it. There is nobody else. And you have a chance today to be a dolphin defender by speaking up for the 55 that are left, because they ain't got nobody else. A precautionary approach is not about mitigating effects. It's not allowing the activity to take place in the first place. We say no, we don't want it. Just like Christchurch did. Just like they did. And I'm going to read you a sentence that will show you all up from the Auckland Plan on page 177. Listen to this. This is what we wrote. So think about this sentence and then vote to oppose offshore drilling. Here's the sentence, page 177. We need to respond to emerging threats which pose risk to our natural heritage. Unless a stronger focus is given to controlling at source those activities and elements that cause environmental harm, Auckland will not achieve its vision. Did you hear? At source, not the effects, not mitigation, at source. Say no, councillors, and be a dolphin defender.
Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our submission is a good one. It was a good one in the last year, and it's a good one this time, especially as it goes to its concern to preserve, protect Maui's dolphins. But really, as you read through it, and you even listen to our officers, you really wonder why we're not opposing this deepwater offshore exploration outright, because really that's more in tune with the concerns that are raised and the issues that are highlighted. And I think even on a tactical level, if no other level, our last response was dispatched with rather dismissively and no changes made. So you'd wonder why we would go down the route of then just doing that again. And I think in this respect, the Christchurch City Council submission is a good key here. I mean, they certainly didn't mince their words. I note from their submission, the council considers that the risk of deep water offshore petroleum exploration and production in these areas are too great. So they made that clear. Their deputy mayor certainly was even more blunt than that, and she was just talking about economic side of the argument, to put their economy at risk for some oil which we actually can't refine in this country is not for us. There is no way this makes any economic sense. So even from an economic perspective, their concerns were reflected in their decision. And interestingly enough, from our position, Christchurch in their strong stance were more successful in securing some concession then. This removal of the overlap with Banks Peninsula Marine Mammal Sanctuary. So taking a stronger line, they actually got more of a concession than we did with our more conciliatory, reasonable approach. So I think we should bear that in mind. I guess a number of councillors have raised the issue of the economic benefits that could, and I guess that verb form would hopefully be a little stronger than could, because that really doesn't really tell us too much or give us too much surety. And certainly if you look at the Department of Labour's employment estimates for petroleum exploration in terms of jobs, they're not big numbers. They're certainly not big numbers in jobs. At 2010, 510 people, and a number of them are people from overseas who have to apply for work permits. So could is not really cutting it as far as even in terms of guaranteeing some economic benefit. But I guess when it's all said and done, and Councillor Casey really, I think, brought this home, is that The high risk for the uncertain benefit is one that we really need to weigh up. It's not a theoretical concern. You know, we know about the Gulf of Mexico, we know about the Reno even, and it's very clear that when something does happen, no amount of legislation or acts are much use there, and you're dealing with a disaster, and even despite the best intentions, these things occur. We can't ensure that doesn't happen. So I guess, you know, for our environment as much as anyone in New Zealand, we've got a lot more at stake for uncertain benefits. So in that respect, I think taking a stronger line and backing this amendment is definitely the way to go.
Thank you.
Sure. I'd like to agree with Councillor Casey and Councillor Watson in respect of the points that I made, and like Councillor Casey, my position today is consistent in respect of my earlier vote. In terms of why we're here, as councillors, we take a comprehensive role. We're here to make the political decisions and look at the big picture. And certainly on my part, if I look at the big picture, then the answer is no to any form of drilling or activity. Zero tolerance. And if I ask myself, well, why is that? And I look at the evidence is very compelling. There is a very significant risk. And the risk is significant because the order of magnitude, that is, what happens, is absolutely catastrophic. Not just catastrophic to Auckland, but catastrophic to New Zealand as a whole, in terms of our brand, in terms of our economy, certainly our fishing economy. But frankly, I don't think that anything else would go unscathed. This would have an enormous effect, and the effect would be long-lasting. And you only have to look at what happened in the Gulf of Mexico to attest to that. If we look at the evidence that Christchurch have provided, they state quite categorically that we don't have any effective spill response. The location that we're talking about, maybe apart from Antarctica or some other distant locations, is probably one of the worst locations on the planet. We're so far away from everything in terms of a clean-up that, frankly, it ain't really going to happen to the extent that it needs to and within the time frame required. If we look at the evidence in terms of the Council's position, we've got the Auckland plan. Councillor Casey referenced that. I'll just read one sentence out of that, and this is around our biodiversity response. Eliminate the risk, and I'll say that again, eliminate the risk, we know what that means, of regional extinction of species through threat management, restoration actions, adaptive management, and increasing species populations within their natural range. And further, protect nationally threatened species where it has been identified that these species are best managed in our region to prevent their national extinction. Now, there's one species in particular that fits that category. That's the Maui dolphin, and allied with the Hector's dolphin. This is categorical in terms of our policy response. If I go further and look at our low carbon strategy, our action plan, our economic strategy, I would suggest that the justification is there across all of those things to take a precautionary approach. If I jump the gun and look at this in terms of iwi concerns, and no doubt that will be taken up. This is a taonga. We're dealing with treasures here in respect of the Maui dolphin and in respect of all of the other species that are our fellows on this planet. So my point is that we've got the evidence to base this on, we've got the policy to base this on, we should be taking a precautionary response. We have little, if any, evidence on the part of the government, so they should be taking a precautionary approach, but they're not. So I back Councillor Casey's amendment. We should not be doing any form of exploratory activity. Mention the public support.
I've now had 3 speakers supporting the amendment, so I'll ask if there are any speakers who have a contrary position to the amendment. Councillor Brewer?
Oh, well, there has to be one, doesn't there, for the...
No, there doesn't.
For the sake of our democracy, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm hopeful that the resolutions that have been put up today via you, Mr. Chair, will be supported unanimously, because I believe that that certainly gives government some direction. As Dr. Blakey has told us, Block 15 in the northern part has been pulled back and is more seaward. And in this submission, we're asking for the Taranaki area to be amended accordingly. We're also asking for greater oversight in the process, greater communication with iwi and with authorities through the RMA process, and doing a lot more and asking for a lot more as far as precautionary elements around risk and regulation. So I think the strongest message we can send the government on Block Offer 15 in our submission is a unanimous stand on those points that we can actually potentially change. The reality is the amendment as it stands is something that has been put to the wider electorate. As the Mayor has told us in the past days, Mr. Chair, that he has gone to the electorate twice against asset sales, and so that issue has been decided in his mind and the minds of Aucklanders that we're not going down that track. Well, dare I say, and it probably won't be a popular sentiment in this room, but dare I say, on that logic, this amendment was effectively put to the electorate on September 20 last year and the previous election too, and they had their say, and eyes wide open and knowing what the agenda and economic direction of the current government was going to be, and Andrew Little effectively put that amendment to the people of Taranaki, and he had his opportunity to stand for the seat of New Plymouth off the back of that, and we know the result that he got there. I think it's important going against this amendment that we remind people that Council's position is that there could be significant economic benefits seeing Taranaki's relationship with the oil and gas sector over many years, with their first oil well being struck in 1860. And many now see that region, a region that I grew up in, as one to certainly follow in many respects. And also the risk factor. We've heard from Greenpeace, who did a very good presentation, but nonetheless, while the impact will be high, we've been told by officers, the probability is very low. And the fact that the Taranaki District Regional Council hasn't made a submission, given that it's lapping on their doorstep, says a lot with the confidence that they've had in that sector for over 155 years. So For me, I think this, the amendments, the resolutions as they stand are strong enough, and if we can get them unanimously passed, it really sends a strong message to government, which I think we can say, hey, all of us across the political spectrum here think you can do better with Block 15, particularly concerns around our marine habitat, in particular the Maui's dolphin. So I'll be supporting the primary chairperson's recommendations, but I'll be voting against the amendment because as far as I see, it's ultra vires. We cannot change the position of the government. They were reaffirmed strongly in September 20. And I think the more stronger position for us is to collectively get in behind these resolutions where we can have influence and we can have change on pulling back Block 15. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Here.
Thank you. We'll have... this is the amendment. We are still going back to the original motion. But Councillor Holst, you wish to speak to the amendment?
I do. Would you generously
I'm just
allow
going.
me to be very brief?
Just going into going along the lines that we have kind of indicated that it would be preferable to adhere more to the three speakers for or against that. Unless there's people to the contrary, we don't prolong there. And with amendments, that can really drag it on because you do get a speech in relation to the original or the motion on
and
the floor.
Mr. Chair, out of respect to your chairing of this, I will keep my comments very, very brief, but I think these are extraordinary circumstances, and I know we have agreed to stick to standing orders, and it embarrasses me much as someone who's a bit of a stickler for that to be the first to break them, but break them I will. So my point is threefold. Number one, I'm going to be supporting the whatever it is proposed by the amendment is proposed by Councillor Kathy Casey, and I think we have. Thank you. I make the point that as someone who prides herself on not heading down the populist route, it's given me a lot of pause for thought on how to deal with this. I don't think I would have chaired the unitary plan if I was into popularity, but this one I think is slightly bigger than whether it's the popular thing or not. We've had an overwhelming response from our community, which leads me to support this amendment. And the critical thing for me is it's not simply about Maui's dolphin, it's about the direction that this city is heading in, which is in support of the low carbon strategy, our public transport strategy and our emissions reduction strategy. And if we are not going to start tightening our belt around our approach to fossil fuels, then we are never going to make those changes. And for me, this has wider implications, and it's for that reason, apart from the environmental reasons and the overwhelming voice of my local community, that the amendment is a delight to support. Thank you.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, I move that the motion now be put.
That's the amendment?
No, I oppose that.
Well, is there a seconder to that? Seconder to that? Councillor and
I'm already on the speaking order. That's not appropriate.
Okay, but he's moved a procedural motion which takes precedence. So with that, I'll put that motion.
I'll call for a division.
It's not even second. Who seconded it?
I second the amendment.
Councillor and I?
Arthur seconded
Oh, sorry, before we start the vote, Dr. Blakely.
Just a point of clarification that one thing you might want to consider is if I take it that the effect of the resolution would be that the whole submission would be attached, but there would be the additional clause in it which says that Auckland Council opposes the allocation of petroleum exploration permits in the proposed area. One of the consequences of that might be that if the government ignores that recommendation, essentially you don't then have the strength of statement about the other provisions which we've put in the recommendation one around, protection of Maui's dolphins. So one way to word it might be that, as is there, that you oppose the allocation of petroleum exploration permits to the proposed area. But then there's a subset to that, that if the government is determined to proceed, then we request the following, which is the 5 points that we had in the submission.
Okay, well, we'll go back to that. We'll now put the procedural motion.
No, we need to debate the procedural motion.
No, you can't. We'll put the procedural motion and see where we get to with that, and then we'll come back.
Well, I oppose the termination of debate on this amendment. I would like to speak.
Councillor Lee, we've got a procedural motion on the floor which takes precedence.
And I wish to speak to the procedural motion.
You can't speak. There's no speakers to a procedural motion, unfortunately, for you. So I'll now put the procedural motion.
By division.
Division, yes.
Is this for the
Procedural motion.
Procedural, yeah.
Councillor Nye?
Aye.
Councillor Brewer?
No.
Councillor Casey?
No.
Councillor Cashmore?
Yes.
Councillor Clow?
No.
Councillor Cooper?
No.
Councillor Filipina?
Against.
Deputy Mayor Hulse? Councillor Crum?
Aye.
Councillor Lee?
No.
Member MacDonald?
No.
Councillor Penrose?
Yes.
Councillor Quacks?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Sir John Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Wayne Walker?
No.
Councillor Watson?
No.
Member Wilcox?
No.
Yes.
Lost 11-8.
Okay, thank you. So now we will go back to Councillor Lee.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. I would like to support the amendment. I voted against the original submission because I felt it was inadequate, and I also felt conditional support, the conditions in the conditional support would be ignored by the government, and so they were. In the officer's presentation, I picked up the point about one of our conditions is to move the drilling area 12 nautical miles from the marine mammal sanctuary, and questioned why that particular distance was being advocated by this council, because it seemed totally inadequate to me in a dynamic marine environment, and the officer's answer was revealing that's the best they felt the government could accept. Well, this is too important matter to be based upon whether it's acceptable to a given government at any time. It's what's acceptable to the public, and even more important actually, what's acceptable for the safety and health of our marine environment. Focusing on a static marine sanctuary in a marine environment, a dynamic marine environment, is scientifically inadequate, given our knowledge of how oil spills can affect a widespread area. It's almost ludicrous in a way. And our submission makes no real mention at all of the impact of the marine ecosystem as a whole and things like pelagic birds. And we know from the RENA event how damaging that event was in terms of killing hundreds of birds. If we felt that we really wanted deep sea oil drilling, but we wanted those conditions of a change of 12 nautical miles to put some distance, minimal distance between drilling and the Maui dolphins' habitat, known habitat. If we really felt we wanted to minimise acoustic disturbance to marine mammals, if we really felt that we wanted the government to ensure that risk of oil spills and other discharges are minimised, we would say no, no way. We don't want any of your drilling. And we might, with people of New Zealand behind us, we might win, but at least we might extract better conditions. But rolling over and putting up fig leaf conditions, in essence, is going to be treated by the government for what these things are. I am very interested in the response of the elected representatives of the people of Christchurch, and Councillor Cashmore focused on the possibility or the probability of earthquakes in the respective regions. This is way bigger than earthquakes. We are talking about the wildest part of the ocean in the world, the Southern Ocean. I understand the concerns of the councillors in Christchurch was their bitter experience being assured by experts of the low possibilities of seismic events and then suffering the tragic events that they have been through. They know that the assurances of experts when it comes to low probability are not necessarily true, and I believe that's what informed their decision. And when you consider it, the coastal marine area and the seaboard of Canterbury is on the east coast, which is way more sheltered than New Zealand's wild west coast, open as it is to the Southern Ocean weather system. People talk about economic development, and we're all for that, but at what cost? We know that inequality is growing, and that the greed for oil has caused enormous damage in the world today, and we just have to look at what has happened in the Middle East over the last 15 years to look at the unspeakable horror that greed for economic development around oil has caused. So 206,000 innocent people killed so far, so in Iraq alone. So in terms of oil and pressure from the big oil interests and what the government of the day wants to do, we have to set that aside, listen to what the public are telling us, use our own brains on the consequences on our marine ecosystem, on our coastline, and support this amendment, which is telling the government no. Thank you.
Councillor Filipina.
Point of order, are you taking speakers now? Because I would like to speak as well.
Well, yes, I mean, we had the closure motion, so that kind of changed the equilibrium or the situation in relation to this, the amendment. So we've had Councillor Lee, and now we've got, so I'll just see how we go. I mean, it depends on if we have any other speakers that have who are supporting the motion, how many, and I think we have to have a cut-off time though.
The debate could have been stopped. The debate could have been stopped, but thanks to Councillor
Brewer,
no,
come on, Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee,
thank you.
It's not your time to speak. It's Councillor Filipina.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just made a point.
Well, you should.
Was the wrong person? Wrong person, wasn't me. I supported you on that.
Councillor Filipina.
I voted against it.
Chair, I'm just going to ask questions, and this is based on what Dr. Blakely has said, and it's also based on the amendment. Now, Dr. Blakely, I just wanted to sort of clarify the permit. With the government, I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the permits for oil offshore drilling is there. The permits are there, and what we are debating here is the area as to where the drilling will take place.
What we're debating is the area within which exploration can take place. There's then a tender process by which people tender to be able to do that exploration. But if it comes to the drilling, then there'll be a requirement for resource consent. And if it's within the coastal area that this council administers, resource consent would come to this council for approval for any drilling activity.
Okay, so then further, and just a supplementary to that, in regards to the amendment which opposes the permit, and you've mentioned the possible repercussions earlier, a few minutes ago, and you sort of suggested that we could look at not changing the amendment, but for me, it's opposing offshore drilling as Auckland Council. That's the key thing for me. I see the word permit in the amendment, and I'm thinking, okay, what repercussions, if any, is the word permit? Because I am opposing the offshore drilling. But I just wanted to get your comment on the word permit being in the amendment, instead of us putting in there as in approve the submission, but to oppose offshore drilling instead of the word permit. I just wanted to see what repercussions or issues would happen if the amendment went through.
I think the effect is similar, but if you want to be more explicit about exactly what you want
Happy to change it. Yeah.
That's the reason I asked the questions, because from what Councillor Brewer said around, the government, and I mean, for me, I know it must have been a coincidence that we ended up getting a request for submission over the Christmas period for this. I'm sure it was a coincidence. But I mean, from my perspective, it's really around the word permit, and whether we as a council oppose the offshore drilling, because that's what I'm hearing around here, is that we do oppose it. But in the event that the minister and the government say, look, we're going to go ahead, thank you very much, at least we have our submission with the 5 points that are there. So hence my question, Roger and Dean.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to change it just to opposes offshore drilling. That's fine.
So just to be clear, also, but it's I take it what you're wanting to oppose is prospective oil and gas exploration. That's what they're asking for at this stage here. Isn't it, to be explicit, what you would say is that you oppose any prospective oil and gas exploration, which in effect means that there could be no further development because there'll be no exploration.
That's what I thought we were discussing through you, Chair. But the fact that our submission that is here, as in the 5 points or the 5 responses, are still going through. In the event the government say, hey, look, thank you, we understand where you are, but we're still going to go ahead and do the tendering process and allow the permit to happen, at least we've got our 5 responses there. So I don't know how much of a change that would be.
Well, Mr. Chair, what I was suggesting was...
We've been debating this amendment for...
No, I just asked a question.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I suppose just to try and get some clarity on what my colleague may be trying to achieve here is this amendment going to be an amendment by addition where it becomes point number 6 or 7 or whatever, or is it actually going to, as Roger, is it going to replace primarily our submission points and our 6 points?
No, it's the amendment.
It is going to be an amendment by addition.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. It replaces paragraph 22.
This is not, these aren't points of orders you people are raising now. This is a situation where Councillor Casey has moved this amendment. The words there are precise, that we approve the attached submission, amending clause 22 to read, Auckland Council opposes the allocation of petroleum exploration permits in the proposed area. So that's what the amendment says.
Chair, and based on Dr. Blakely's comment, I'm asking the question around opposing the offshore drilling in regards, instead of the permit, and this is why I'm just waiting for Dr. Blakely to give a response through you, Chair.
To try and, Mr. Chairman, just to try and be as clear as possible, I think the wording of Councillor Casey would have the effect, if government accepted it, that there would be no offshore exploration because there would be no petroleum exploration
No means
permits.
no. No means no.
All right,
So the effect of that would be no exploration, therefore no future development. The point I was making was that would replace the existing paragraph 22. And if, in fact, government doesn't agree with council on that point, you then don't have a supplementary case for the 5 points that we had recommended for protection of the environment, including Hector's dolphin. So one way, if you wanted to, would be to say that's what you recommend to government, but if they're not prepared to do that, then we want to make sure those 5 points were implemented.
So, but we aren't debating that at the moment. That's not what we're debating. So
It's
you
not
finished,
no,
Councillor?
fingers
thank you.
crossed.
Okay, and the next is Councillor and I.
Well, thank you, Chair. I've been asking myself the question, do we need the economic gain from the offshore drilling? And the answer is, there's no answer that's been given to me to say we do. And we've seen the damage, possible damage that we can have from Greenpeace. We've also seen what's happened around the world for those who produce. Do we need to be a producer? No. Why? Because we're satisfied with the markets delivering to us from around the world. So where does my responsibility lie? My responsibility lies for those that are not yet here. Those that are not here to even vote for this. And I'm talking the unborn that are coming into Auckland and New Zealand. My responsibility is to make sure we protect what we have for them tomorrow, and therefore I vote against it.
Councillor Clow?
I'm voting against it as well, so you need to find another speaker.
I'm getting confused.
Councillor Crum, do you want to speak?
Sorry, I mean, I'm voting for the amendment, I'm not
Thank
voting.
So can I just confirm, for clarity's sake, that the 3 and 3 is gone by the wayside, so we are now speaking to the amendment?
Yes, because we had the point of order, or the notice, the precedent notice of motion that was put, which indicated that we wouldn't have a closure, so we're continuing.
Right. Okay, well then I will speak in opposition to this amendment, and I'd like to make the following points, that I think it's a very reasoned and considered submission that we have drafted and proposed here before us. It's by no means one end of the scale. I can see that officers and staff have taken considerable time to be very careful to give us the best leverage that we possibly can with the government in this regard and for this topic. We've got plenty of action points listed here in this submission to try and put up our voice to the government of the day, right down to, and Councillor Clow has mentioned it, the assessment of tenders, the words at least 12 nautical miles. We've asked for feedback from the local boards, and when I asked Dr. Blakely in regards to the word strong support from Waitakere Local Rangers Board and from Puki Te Papa, that was confirmed, strong support from those local boards. We often and situationally point to needing to confirm that does our debate, do our topics, do our subjects stack up with local boards? Well, in this case, they do. And it's also been mentioned by a colleague of mine that there's been overwhelming response from the community. Yes, there has been from the Greenpeace community. I am not aware of a single response from my community. There could be, but the responses from Greenpeace were pro forma and in a very technologically savvy way, which by the way, if we're talking about responses from my community, I can't get to all the responses from my community on topics like the long-term plan.
Yeah.
Because my inbox was so inundated. I have had topics, but it's taken hours to get to them on the long-term plan, which is arguably the biggest topic that we will traverse in this term. I am aware that there have been responses, but I'm still trying to get to them on cultural impact assessments, on Maunga Authority, school buses, staff salaries, you name it. But what it's meant, what the process to try to get to those particular issues that I'm traversing has been harrowing, to say the least. So I would suggest that Greenpeace are well within their rights to have their opinion, and I applaud their presence today, but tactics could be a little different. We have several topics that we're traversing as councillors, and the staff time it's taken up as a result of your methodology has been undesirable, to say the least. I think that what we have here, again, is a reasoned and considered approach, and it's one that we need to support. It's our best chance of getting a message through to the government that stacks up.
Thank you. Councillor Quacks, looks like you're the final speaker to this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess it's explicit in my seconding, my secondment of the original motion that I will be speaking against this the amendment. Look, I'm very happy with the submission that we have put that's before us today. It doesn't shy away from the risks, Mr. Chairman, at all. It does say there are some risks, and the risk of a blowout, I know, is small. We're talking here about exploration as well. We're not yet talking about drilling, and I think that we tend to forget, and it seems to be in this whole debate, we're talking about exploration. We're not talking about a whole bunch of oil rigs out there pumping up gallons of oil. There may, in fact, be no oil there. That may in fact be what the consequences of the exploration might be. So it is about exploration. It's not about oil drilling. So we've very well, the submission has quite properly identified those risks that are there, but it has also identified the fact that there are benefits. And I am surprised that the Chair of Economic Development has gone against the idea of exploration, given the fact, and I don't know if the Chair of Economic Development is aware of this, but oil and gas is New Zealand's 4th largest export.
That's right.
Leading us, or giving us, amongst other exports that we have, the standard of living that we enjoy and the standard of living that enables people to send 10,000 spam messages to elected members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not spam.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'm going to put the...
I didn't get any applause.
No, I'll put the amendment, but...
By division.
The
Thank you.
Secretary's not here.
Arthur's gone now.
Where's Arthur?
Where's Arthur?
Where's the Mayor?
Gone.
Oh, here she
Is
comes.
Arthur coming?
Is the Mayor going to vote, Mr. Chair? He's on Hami FM. That's his only
Oh,
appointment today.
come on, Councillor.
Have a look.
Where is he?
All right.
Can we,
Bar is empty.
can we
Where we
take
go?
the vote, thanks?
Where we go?
Mr. Chair.
Go on.
Councillor Nye.
Yeah, Arthur's gone, he's not here.
He may be here.
Councillor Brewer.
No, yeah.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Councillor Cashmore.
No.
Councillor Clow.
Yes.
Councillor Cooper.
No.
Councillor Philippina.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Hulse.
Aye.
Councillor Crum.
No.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Member McDonald.
Aye.
Councillor Penrose.
No.
Councillor Quacks.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Sir John Walker.
No.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Member Wilcox?
Yes.
Chair.
No.
Close.
It's a tie. 9.
Oh.
Well,
George,
I'll use my casting
Where's
vote
Arthur?
to vote against the
Where's
amendment.
Arthur?
Where's Arthur?
is
Councillor Anai in the room?
No, too late.
Moved to vote against the amendment. I now...
by
Point of order.
Strongly
It's
against it. Why
order.
wasn't his vote recorded?
Order.
Order, Mr Chairman.
Order.
Once the vote has been taken, there's no further discussion on it.
Where
We're
is
now...
Here he is.
Oh, no, it doesn't. No.
Original motion.
In
Order.
all fairness, I asked that the vote be put again.
Order. Councillor Lee, order. The vote has been taken.
I asked Councillor and I was not in the room.
Well, I'm sorry, Councillor Lee, the vote was
Point of
taken.
order, Mr Chairman. I asked specifically whether Councillor Anai was in the room and he appeared.
Well, he wasn't in the room, the vote's
After the
been
result.
taken, Councillor. So we're back to the original motion. I will now, order.
That's
order.
not fair.
Completely fair.
of order, Mr
That's
Chairman.
democracy.
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
It's all over, Councillor.
Point of
not
order,
over.
Mr Chairman.
Let's have a cup of tea.
So
Base our democracy in front
We've had democracy.
we are now back to the original motion. Are there any speakers to the original motion?
Point
please?
of order, Mr Chairman.
There's no point of order.
I can
know-
make a point of order at any
Well,
time.
tell me what your point of order is.
I've been a councillor for 20 years, 21 years this year, and I've never seen anything quite like this. Can I just ask a question?
lost vote?
Of
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Of democracy services.
Point of
This
order.
is a point of order.
It's not a point of order.
This is a point of order. I would
What
like
number
to,
is it?
I would like an opinion
Well, can you
from...
tell me what point of
I'm
order
not-
it is?
can I get it out?
Okay.
I'd like an opinion from Democracy Services about the presence of councillors in the room or its environs, because I think he was in the loo.
Well,
I'd like a clarification. And Councillor Walker did ask if Councillor Anai was in the room, and I couldn't hear the answer.
Well, I asked
But
the mayor was
if,
in the room.
If you have an emergency and you have to leave, I'm serious. I've never seen this before.
it's not a point of order.
It was a ruling from Democracy Services with regard to whether if a councillor has left the meeting and is in the environs, i.e. in the loo, is there not a kind of...
Well, I'm sorry, it's not a
and he
point of order.
returns to the meeting.
Please, to desist, please.
It is
It's
a
not
point of order.
Mr Chairman.
We are now back to the...
It is a point of
We are
order.
now back to the original motion,
Clarification.
and I will put... If there are any speakers...
Clarification.
Any
What
speakers
does the
to
standing
original
order
motion?
say about the presence of councillors?
Councillor... Oh, come on. Councillor Walker? Councillor Walker?
Yeah,
This is corruption! Bullshit! This is
Councillor Walker?
just want
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Take the vote again.
We will adjourn the meeting, please adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr Chair.
Mr Chair, I think I have an idea.
I
that
had a
maybe
question.
that may be helpful.
Had the vote. I had a question, Mr Chair.
We may have a way forward. It would be very useful for us to simply vote or not vote on whether the submission is accepted, and then we have a chance, if the submission is not accepted, to simply come up with an alternative. It gives us the ability to take a sensible and reasoned vote again. I just call for calm and sensible heads around this.
Well, we're taking an adjournment for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.